hey, I want to have a life around climbing. I can't believe I'm talking about this on the podcast, but grit your teeth to get through some of those moments where you actually want to quit.
So welcome to the Radical Hospitality Show. I'm your host, Zeke Freeman. Incredibly excited today to get to sit down with Asa Firestone, the CEO of A Lodge. Just a really magical place. I discovered this last year. I was coming up to look at some opportunities up in Estes Park with a friend of mine. And on the way, I drove by and I saw your A Lodge and Lions. I was like, wow, that's something cool going on in there. So I kind of pulled over and talked to your staff for a minute. They were super kind and told me a little bit about what you're doing. They're like, yeah, we've got another one up here in Boulder. You should check that one out if you get a time. And so I had a little bit of extra time after my meeting. I drove up here and, it was just something like out of like a, adventure movie. You come up the canyon and, you got beautiful light coming through here. I pull in and you've got a band going on. You had a food truck, whole field full of yogis out here.
Nice.
It's just
you
so
came
good.
up at the right time.
I just assume that happens all the time.
Yeah, I wish. No, that's a special. So we call that adventure yoga, and it's one of we do 6 of them a year. We have a live DJ in our event space right along the creek, and we get like 100 yogis from Boulder to come up and do yoga outside with a live DJ spinning to the yoga.
Okay.
And then afterwards, he then sets up on our stage in the beer garden. Everyone gets a free drink, and then we have like a little mini yoga rave in the beer garden. It's awesome.
It's so good.
That's a special 6 days of the year. That's really one of my favorite days. So I'm glad you're up here for that. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So I just pulled in. I was like, man, whatever they're doing up here, like we got to figure it out.
Nice.
You just had such a great vibe.
Nice.
And then I started digging into, your background a little bit and just kind of online stalking you. And it looks like you've just got such a cool history in the outdoor industry and, as a climber. And I love what you're kind of creating here with this space of adventure and hospitality. So welcome to the Radical Hospitality Show.
Well, thank you, man. Gosh, I need these pep talks more often because, it's such a fun industry, but there's so many moments that are so hard.
Yeah.
That, getting somebody else to, see what the vision is and to remind you why you're working so hard is so crucial. So thank you for those kind words.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Well, I know probably as a climber, like you're one of these guys that have a tenacity for hard things. So, I'm sure this is one. Maybe take us back just a little bit, to your background as an adventurer and a climber. Like, when did you fall in love with outdoors and adventure, and what brought you up here to Colorado doing that?
Nice. Well, so we go way back. So my dad worked in Colorado in the summers. I grew up in DC, but he would come out in the summer. So my summer camp was coming to Colorado. And so since I was 8 years old, all through high school. And so I, would go on these youth group trips to climb 14ers or go climbing and go rafting. So that's how I fell in love with the outdoors. So then when it was time to go to college, I came out here, started Colorado College and transferred to CU and fell in love with rock climbing. And so then I joined the CU Alpine Club, which is an amazing club. Cool. And essentially it was like a fraternity of climbers without all the bullshit of being in a fraternity.
Yeah.
And so that's where I cut my teeth as a climber and learned, not from a guide or anything, but just from our peers. And it was just like the coolest way to become a climber. You just, every day you're just excited to go climbing, to see what your buddies are doing. They'll have a little like healthy competition. And I quickly was attracted to big walls and like the most adventurous part of climbing. So spent a summer in Yosemite, as a monkey, a climbing monkey in the valley, sleeping in the boulders in Camp 4, learning how to big wall climb and doing sketchy shit. And then I got a grant with the American Alpine Club to climb in Peru. Did another grant with them in Africa and on Mount Kenya. And then eventually, when I was 25, I got a National Geographic Young Explorers grant. And I lived in Brazil as a foreign exchange student in Brazil. And I had a buddy from Philly, and we were both like, he was a climber, we were both in college together, and we were both kind of these like East Coast hip hop climbers. And like, there was nobody else that was exactly like that was in our crew. So I was attracted to want to climb with him. It was like 2005 and he was still sagging his pants like way below his butt. And I was like, that's my dude.
Yeah.
So he had been to Brazil and we set out and we're like, let's go climb a first ascent like that comes out of the Amazon. Let's just see what we can find. There's got to be some epic stuff out there. So we found this mountain that was climbed by some legendary climbers, Rick Ridgway, Paul Piana, Todd Skinner, in like 91. And it was called Aratitiope. And it was literally in the deepest, darkest part of the Amazon. And it was a shark's fin, a 2,000-foot shark's fin of granite that just came out of nowhere in the Amazon. And we were like, we saw a picture of it. We could find one picture and we were like, that thing, let's go climb that. So we applied for this grant. Rick Ridgway, turned out he was on the board that decided who got the grant. And he had climbed it in 91. He was like, that was one of the hardest climbs I've ever done. Let's see if these guys can do it. So we go out there and we get on a boat. It's a 2-week boat journey into the jungle on like a little bongo boat.
I was there, yo.
No, it's got a motor.
Carved out canoes.
But so first off, it's in Venezuela.
Okay.
And
this is during Civil War or before all
this
that?
It's during Hugo Chavez, so it was bad, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it is now.
Yeah.
But it was still weird and sketchy out there for sure. So we get on this boat, go 2 weeks into the jungle. This could be its own podcast, so I'll try to sum this up. We get out there 2 weeks sitting on a boat. We're climbers. We're like trying to keep in shape, and we're just sitting on this boat for 2 weeks, just getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, going through tribes. And like we get 6 Yanomami tribesmen to get on our boat to help us, guide us through the jungle. We get off the boat, but we couldn't get all the way up the river to where we needed to get to because the water level is too low. And our boat driver was like, hey, the water level fluctuates. If we get caught up here, it's already too low. If we keep going and push it, we could get stuck out there. And then you'd have no water and you can't get out and we'd die. So, and then I also forgot to mention that this is in a Venezuelan military zone. Mm-hmm. So there's these checkpoints and we had to lie to the military of Venezuela and be like, we're going to continue going down that river instead of turning off this tributary to go into this like forbidden area where the climb was. So we get off the boat, start trekking through, and pretty quickly we're like, we're just like hacking through the jungle, and we're going like 2 miles a day, and we're out there for a couple of days, and then the Yanomami guides that we had with us, they started to get pissed with us because they were like, you guys are moving too slow, you have too much crap with you. Whereas we're trying to put up a 2,000-foot big wall.
Yes, you got a lot.
So we got
a lot of gear.
Oh man,
heavy.
Yeah, and then they're like, the mountain's over here, but our GPS is like, no, it's over there. And so we climb a tree to see if we can see it. We can't see it because it's just too thick. And we're like, well, we got to go with our GPS. And then that's when they started to get extra angry, and we were like, man, if things really hit the fan, these guys could just kill us and leave us in the jungle. Like what's going to happen to them? Nothing. So at a certain point, you know, it was like 5 days in, we were like, this is not going to work. So we had to turn around.
Pulled
We
the
never
parachute.
even got to the freaking mountain.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was, and then literally we just got back on our boat, turned around, went 2 weeks back. We did stop. We found a pretty cool smaller mountain that was closer to the river, and we were able to put a couple pitch first ascent up on that. And we got some cool video footage for National Geographic. My buddy took a pretty rad little aid fall on it, and I got the hand crack pitch. But inside this crack, there was literally like 1,000 squirming bats. Like I'm like jamming this crack in the middle of nowhere in the Amazon, and there's just bats crawling all over each other, like this far away from my hands. But it was rad. We then afterwards, we took a Cessna into the Tepui area, like near Angel Falls, and we were able to put up a first ascent, like big wall, like 1,200 feet route that we called Los in Venezuela, or Perdidos in Venezuela, and that was amazing. Looking back, we should have just gone there because that place is amazing climbing. It was way easier to get to.
That's adventures, though. I mean, like you may start out with a point, but you never know where you end up.
Yeah, so totally. Well, we had recruited this Brazilian legendary climber, Sergio Tartari, to come with us because I knew that the type of rock, that tropical granite big wall, that's what's in Brazil.
Okay.
And so I was like, hey, let's recruit the most badass Brazilian climber and get him to come with us. So that way we'll have somebody who really has that experience. And we flew him out to Venezuela. He gets there, and then we explain the plan, and we're like, so we're gonna sit on a boat for 2 weeks, and then we're gonna trek in for 5 days. And he looked at us and he was like, oh man, my back is, I don't know what happened, but my back is totally busted up. I don't think I can go on this trip. And he literally just like bailed on us, like when he's in Caracas, and flew back to Brazil. I should have realized when that happened. I was like,
here's looking at these two kids, like, man, they don't know what they're doing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he knew better. So anyways, so that was, and there are moments when I look at the A Lodge and I look back at that expedition and I see parallels. It's like we've been able to make this work, but there's so many difficulties and
Yeah, let me slide in there another question before you go into it. So, the adventurer, I feel like there's so many like truly great businesses that have come out, and businessmen like Yvon Chouinard, and you look at the 10th Mountain Division guys that started Half a Veil and all of the ski resorts basically in Colorado, like that. There's something deep inside of men to get out and do hard things.
Yeah.
And I think men who take the step to do that, businesses become much less daunting. Whether you fail or not on your adventures. What were some of the lessons that you took out of this Venezuelan trip and some of your other adventures that you brought into A Lodge and business as you?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. I mean, honestly, for me, it's tenacity, right? It's just and commitment, right? It's like when you're on a big wall, whether it's in Yosemite or in the middle of nowhere in the Amazon, you got to be committed. Like once you get up there, and you got to make good decisions and be confident in those decisions, and then understand that those decisions you got to be committed to, and you have to, bite the bullet to, get through those tough moments. Like I soloed Zodiac on El Capitan with ropes, and it took me 7 days. And there's moments when I was on that climb where I'm like sitting in a portaledge by myself, scared, tired, beat up. I had poison ivy all over my legs that was just like eating me alive. And there's like so many moments where I was like, I just want to go down. Like, this is not fun anymore.
Yeah.
But I would tell myself, okay, I'm going to do one more pitch. And a pitch takes like 3 hours when you're climbing solo, you're aid climbing solo, because you got to go up, then go back down, release your anchor, and then clean the root. So you're really climbing it twice, and it's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then you got to haul your bag yourself. So, I would say, okay, I'll do one more pitch, and then I'll make a decision. Then I can go down. And at a certain point, I was high up enough where I was like, you know what? It's going to be easier to just keep going up than it is to go down. Like I'm just that committed at this point. So I think that that's similar to, starting a business where you've got to, grit your teeth to get through some of those moments where you actually want to quit. Because, and then at a certain point, it is going to be easier to keep moving forwards than it is to bail, in the middle of it,
yeah.
right? And what's the worst that happens? Like, on a big wall, you fall off the cliff and die. Like, that sucks. But then you're dead, and like,
that's right.
Yeah,
Not much to worry about that
yeah,
point.
exactly. And same thing with the business. It's like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? All right, you declare bankruptcy, you waste your career. Those are big deals. But in the end, it's like, well, what else are you going to do? Like, you got to try something. And everything in life has a risk to it.
Yeah.
So you might as well embrace some of that risk. Try something hard. Try to have fun. And, you might get lucky and accomplish something awesome. At the very least, you have an adventure in life. You're not like, 7 years old in a cubicle looking back and being like, oh, man, I wish I had started that lodge or gone on that big wall trip. And I will say that it gets harder to do that stuff as you get older. Like I got
more people depended on you at some point. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't think at this point in my life, I'm 42, I don't think I could do what I've been doing A Lodge now for 10 years. I don't know if I could start that today. It's possible. Maybe if I didn't have all the brain damage from the last 10 years or the knowledge of how hard it is.
Sometimes naivety is like, a real blessing.
Yeah.
I'm 43 and I feel like we're starting where you started 10 years ago, heading up.
Well, the thing is though, that what you've got is you're an architect. You've been in this industry. You've learned on someone else's dime. That was the thing that my dad said to me that was amazing advice that I didn't listen to at all. Is he was always like, hey, if you want to start a business, learn on someone else's dime.
Oh, that's great advice.
And I was like, that's smart, but I'm not going to do that. That doesn't sound fun. Go work in a hotel for 10 years. Like, I don't want to do that. I want to just start a hotel and figure it out. And so, I think that is one difference is that with you've designed all these different buildings. You've been part of all these historic building projects and like seen all the pitfalls and the issues. So that way you have so much of an advantage going in and starting a project than I did. I never worked at a hotel. I worked at a restaurant when I was 16. I was like a busser for 2 days and I got fired. That was the most service that I had had before I started this.
I agree and I disagree. I think, sometimes life just has this way of, you step into things and then, that thing leads to the next thing and it's, and it builds upon each other, and what makes, all of it like interesting is, creating that beautiful mix, A Lodge is special because of the all of those history of adventures and probably people you gathered around that do that and then you throw in something new that you don't learn and or know about learn it as you go. I know with us with Red it's kind of been the same way where for us it's a full circle back of I grew up doing adventure guiding, and we'd take kids all over the U.S. when I was actually in high school, and I slept underneath a bus and just loved that. And I thought I would head off kind of your direction of like National Geographic and climb, and spent 10 years in the corporate world and working and it was good. But then it's a full circle back. It's like, all right, we'll step into the next thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that, to your point, like whatever your path is, the key is to be able to make that decision so that you have a definitive direction of where you're going.
Yeah.
Like, something that I like, I say this a lot, and I don't know if it's really that wise, but, you want to look for parking. I can't believe I'm talking about this on the podcast, but I always think that it's, in life, as in when you're looking for parking, like you're going to a restaurant, look for parking by the front door of the restaurant, because, otherwise you're going like a couple blocks away, you're like, oh, I'm going to get parking over here. Well, it's like maybe there's a spot right in front of where you're actually going. And the fact that you know where you're going, even if there's not a spot there, now you're in the right neighborhood to find parking. And so I think that it's similar, whether it was in my situation where I'm like, hey, I want to have a life around climbing. I want to enable and provide access to people to get out there and to have adventures. So that brought me through a wave of different things, but each time I had a specific direction of where I was going. Maybe that didn't work out, but then I was in that neighborhood that was right where I should be.
Yeah.
And now there's other opportunities to be able to take advantage of. And same thing with you of like, hey, you were into adventure and then you wound up being, an architect and working in the corporate world. Well, that gave you a ton of tools and experiences that now you can draw on to do this amazing project that you're working on in Morrison. So, they're totally different paths, but I think that one thing that is similar is just being totally committed to the current path that you're on, because no matter where that brings you, it's going to bring you to a good spot. Where I think people get really stuck is when they're not fully committed to a path and they're worried, like, I got to wait for the right path. Well, it's like, no, just take a path.
Pick one.
Yeah, pick one. Because there's not, even if you pick the wrong path, it's like, there's going to be plenty of right paths from there. At least you've made progress.
And you go back to your Venezuela story. I mean, you didn't end up where what your original destination was, but you chose to, take that adventure into Venezuela, took you down another path, and that led to the next. And what a great, just commitment to take action. I think, talk about like in the 20s, like I think the biggest, mistake, anybody in their 20 to 30s makes are just, not taking action. Like whatever you do, you're probably going to fail at a few of them.
Yeah,
but all of these things, right? So you just get in and start doing it, and those are the things that like build, an amazing life.
Totally. I mean, it's like you gotta, like, if you want to be a climber, there's going to be times where you got to start a climb, a big wall or a sport route or whatever it might be, and you might realize that you got to get out of it. This is not going to work. And you're going to learn a ton from getting out of that as you would from completing it.
Yeah.
Sometimes even more, where like getting off a big wall, if it's not going to work, that's an important skill to understand how to do, So I think that in life, if you don't try hard things, you're missing out on so many lessons and so many awesome experiences, and you can't be worried about failure. Obviously, if I could help it, I would have sent every single climb I ever tried, and this business, I'd have 10 of these by now, and everything would be perfect, and I would send everything. But, I'd much rather, you learn so much, you have great experiences, you can't be scared of failure.
Yeah, love it. So let's circle back to A-Lodge.
Yeah.
And so you went really, heavy into this kind of career of adventuring. You got your business degree. What brought you back into hospitality and this project?
Oh gosh, I mean, honestly, it was I was an engineer. I studied physics at CU, then became an engineer. I did energy efficiency in buildings, and then I decided to go get my MBA, and I studied entrepreneurship there because I kind of equated entrepreneurship similar to big wall climbing. It's like you've got to have a big vision and a big passion for something. Then you've got to pull together some expedition partners and go get some funding, and then you just have to go suffer. And I think that's the same thing with the big wall. So I studied entrepreneurship. I knew that's what I wanted to do because I was like, well, I want to go big wall climbing, and this is the equivalent in the business world. And so I did a nonprofit project in Brazil to get kids from the favelas climbing in Rio. Oh. And then I started something here, got kicked out of it actually by my two co-founders, which was a funny story on its own. But I then was looking at, okay, what should I do now? So I actually started applying for jobs. I got a job making $12 an hour at a store on Pearl Street selling outdoor equipment, just so I'd, bring in a little money, but mostly so I just felt like I wasn't a total deadbeat at the time. And then I was deciding, there was two projects I was looking at, and I was making a decision. Climbers Hostel in Boulder, okay, or a climbing gym in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And I still look back and I'm like, well, did I make the right decision? But it would have been really fun to live in Brazil. I lived there when I was a foreign exchange student as a kid. But I was like, man, you know what? If I'm going to be a gringo business owner in Rio, like, it's probably not going to go well. So I was like, you know what?
How's your Spanish?
Well, Portuguese.
Portuguese. Okay.
Well, at the time it was better than it is now. Yeah. But I used to know Portuguese pretty well. But so I made the decision. Let's go after a climbers hostel in Boulder, and I found this place. Was able to pull some money from an investor, and then this deal was a little complicated. But the next thing I knew, we owned this hotel. It was super run down, and we had guests in the rooms. And I was like, okay, well, now I got to run a hotel.
So you brought in just one investment partner on it?
Yeah.
Is he still partnered with you on this?
Yes. So okay. The way that this project works is, so we have two hotels. This property is structured separately from the other one.
Yeah.
This one, I have a family investor who used a 1031 exchange on another property that they sold. And I actually lease from them.
Okay.
But it's a triple net lease, so I pay the property taxes, I pay for all the renovations, and eventually one day, hopefully we'll own this property myself. But that's how this property is structured.
And you just charge a management fee?
No,
we
lease it.
You lease it. Okay,
yeah,
so you got a flat lease, and whatever you make is a business on top.
Yeah, it's a triple net lease, so they're making a small, interest on their original investment, and then so that way
that's smart.
Yeah, well, look, I wouldn't recommend a lease unless it was an investor that property owner that you were really tight with, or you were going to own that, you had a deal to own that property later. Because the problem with the lease on a hotel is there's so much capital improvements that go into a hotel that if you're doing a triple net lease and you are responsible for all of the investment and you don't actually own the property, then the upside on the income that you're going to make on on the business, there's so many expenses that go in, it's going to be hard to make money on that. Whereas a management deal is a lot more common for normal hotels. And in that deal, you are guaranteed to make money no matter what. Obviously you're going to make a lot more if the business is super profitable.
Yeah.
But you're not going to lose money. You're going to, and you're guaranteed a percentage of gross.
Could you just convert it into like an owner finance, go from a lease to a lease option?
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, if that's, that wouldn't make sense in my situation because, the tax laws and the way that I'll eventually get this property. Just to be honest, it's my parents owned a condo in the mountains. They sold that, then they did a 1031 to invest in this property. So we essentially traded a 4-bedroom condo for a beat up 30-room hotel. And eventually how it would work is that I would inherit this. It would make a lot more sense for me from a tax perspective to inherit the property than to buy it over time through
Okay.
owner financing. Just because when you inherit a property, your tax basis gets stepped up.
Yeah. And so
So-
that kind of gives you an incentive to like put in the improvements along the way.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and I wanted to create something cool.
yeah.
And so, the majority of our profits have gone back into the property at this point. A lot of that.
So talk
is
about
just
what all
repairs.
is at this property now. I mean, you guys
So
do
this
some cool
property
things.
we've got 12 hostel beds. We have 11 campsites. We have 8 tent campsites and 3 van life sites.
Okay.
And then we've got 27 private rooms that range from our base camp queens, which are just standard queen hotel rooms, to a 3-bedroom cabin. We just bought the house next door, which is a 4-bedroom house with a sauna in it. It's super cool.
Nice.
And that's one of my big focuses right now, is to legally get the ability to roll that property into the hotel operation.
Okay.
So that'll be the crown jewel of the property as like a unit to rent, an accommodation, once that is done. And yeah, so
And
I
so
mean,
you've got a lot of variety of rental types that come in through this.
Yeah.
Is there some that work well and some that don't? Is it kind of like having a diversified portfolio where some are seasonal, some are not? Would you?
I think everything is seasonal. Like Boulder's market, we're summer heavy. I mean, we make so much more. Our occupancy and our RevPAR, or ADR, is so much bigger in the summer months than it is in February. This is definitely our slow season.
Do you get
right now.
into the ski season like Eldora? Do people really? I mean, is it
We
so
do,
close that they don't stay, or do they stay and then go up?
We do get some of that. Eldora is not Breckenridge or Aspen or Vail. Eldora is a local's mountain.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that will travel to Eldora, but not that many.
Yeah.
Right? Most of the vast majority of people who are skiing at Eldora live in Boulder and Denver or Fort Collins. Right? They live on the Front Range. They're going to Eldora because it's close, and they don't have to get on I-70, and they're going up there for the day, and then they're not staying, in Nederland or Boulder.
Yeah, makes sense. It's a little bit like Loveland. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's too close.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Now,
what percentage do you make in your on season versus your off season? Just
I
if you were to
mean,
guess.
if I was to guess on that, it would be 2/3 or more. I mean, we are a seasonal business, and our Lions property is even more seasonal. Lions is a totally different beast, or it's not a beast at all. It's only 7 units, which has a lot of issues that we could get into. But Lions is super slow in the winter, right? Because the big draw in Lions is weddings. There's 5 wedding venues in Lions, so that's the biggest draw, and the national park. In the wintertime, the national park gets way less traffic, and there's so many hotels and Airbnbs and accommodations in Estes Park that in the winter, if you're going to go up there, you might as well just stay in Estes Park. In the summer, we get, those fill up. There's so much demand. There's weddings, all sorts of things that we get a lot of traffic, overflow traffic from Estes Park. We get all the wedding guests in Lions. And Lions is just an awesome place to be in the summer.
Yeah.
But yeah, both.
If you were to guess for Morrison, like moving down the Front Range, you got Lions, Boulder. What would you think Morrison would end up being like? Yeah.
Morrison is different. It's totally different. You've got Red Rocks there.
Yeah.
And so.
Which is still kind of on season though.
It's on season, but the season
October.
is longer.
Yeah.
May through October. I'm not sure how many shows there are in November through April, but there are shows in the winter. I bet you in April there's probably a ton of shows at Red Rocks.
Yeah. There's 200 total shows now that they're doing.
Yes, 200 total shows. That's not a horrible season there. And beyond just, Red Rocks is to me, and I haven't studied Morrison as a market, but from my gut, Red Rocks is 100% the demand driver for that market. But beyond that, Red Rocks Morrison is a beautiful town. It's close to Denver. there's a reason, there's no reason why people wouldn't want to come up and just hang out in Morrison. As it is, there might be some wedding venues nearby. There's not necessarily skiing that close, but there's golf courses. There's a lot of different things to do around Morrison. It's just beautiful up there, in addition to Red Rock. So I think that's awesome. I mean, similar with us in Boulder.
So what are the things you do to drive during the off season? You guys have a pretty cool business center here. Are you?
The business center is not a major driver. I mean, this room here is our meeting room. We market this for corporate offsites of up to 10 people.
Yep.
Come up, get away from town, or bring your corporate leadership group to A Lodge, and then do your offsite in this room. You can really focus. You're surrounded by the mountains, so we do get some of that. My newest project here is we built a sauna right by the creek.
Okay.
And my theory there, and we're still testing, it's still only a couple of months old, but my theory there is, one, the sauna cold plunge movement right now, it's totally in vogue.
Yeah.
It's this is the cool thing to do. So my theory on that is, let's try it. It's not that expensive. And in the wintertime, maybe that could be a draw to bring people up here so that they could actually have kind of a staycation or a retreat feel. So eventually, I'd love to do more of that.
And that's your first hot tub sauna, or did you have any of that?
So we've got a hot tub here. We've
Yeah.
always had a hot tub. We have an old pool up here as well, but it's only open in the summer.
Okay.
Essentially Memorial Day to Labor Day, or past Labor Day. But so the pool is great in the summer, but again, attracting people in the wintertime during our slow season, the hot tub helps for sure. But a sauna by the creek with a big window where you can see nature while you're in the sauna, that's a different
experience.
It's a different experience, and it's every hotel's got a hot tub, right. But most hotels don't have what we have with the sauna. And eventually we might expand on it. I'd love to get massage up here, get a little yurt or massage tent. I'd love to have cold plunges, but for now, we got the creek going through. If you want a cold plunge, just jump in the creek. Granted, all of December and January, the creek was totally frozen. My GM got a big metal tub and filled it up with water and had that right next to the sauna. And people were cold plunging in there until they didn't drain it, and then it just froze solid. And then we couldn't move it.
You just got to keep a sledge by it.
Well, it was funny because we got, we're the sauna business actually did a lot better than we thought. We rent it out to locals as well as we give it free to guests. And all of our rentable sessions were booking up. I mean, we're blown away at how successful it was doing. But then we started seeing on Instagram people posting, and as a joke, they would be like, oh man, the A Lodge cold plunge is awesome. And there would be them just sitting on top of a frozen tub. And I was like, oh, that's maybe not the best publicity. So we finally, that melted out, and we finally were able to move that. So we're, that's one of those scenarios where we're like, hey, let's test this. Let's just build this, see how it goes. Let's not have a foolproof plan. Let's just build it and see if it's successful. And then we can always add to it. We can, figure out we're in the right neighborhood once we get it built. And then we can figure out, do we need to build more? Should we build cold plunges? Should we do a massage room? Figuring that out once we've got some data and learned, rather than being like, oh, we got this foolproof plan. We're going to spend $500,000 on a spa.
Yeah. Test it a little bit.
Yeah.
See if you're getting some body. Yeah. We just finished the design for Losport Campground up in Grant, and it's kind of similar. It's along the Gwendella Pass that takes you up to Mount Beardstadt. So it's that exit right there, and it's along a river. We did 9 cabins, 9 RV spots, and then we've got this really steep, kind of unbuildable hill, and we've been, we put into our plan development ability to do like tree houses, or maybe I like your pad sites out here, just for now, just to get some, options for them. And then they want to kind of test out some wedding things. So they're going to be opening here in about a month or so.
That sounds like a really cool project. There's actually really good bouldering up Guanella Pass.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I wonder if you get any climbers up there. Probably climbers are a little tough, right? Because they don't want to spend much money.
Yeah.
But more and more climbers have money, right? So,
it's not the cheap sport anymore. When I was, traveling around in the back of underneath a bus, it was all like super sketchy. Now my son, he's 18, and he's got a rack that's worth as much as my first car was.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think climbers, it's kind of like used to be such a fringe. When Yvonne Chenard and Royal Robbins were climbing, it was such a fringe, and the whole point was for it to be super dangerous. It's totally changed now.
With all
it's
the
a
gens
sport.
coming in. And
It's like it's not as cool to go out and climb something because it's super dangerous. It's cool to climb something that's super gymnastic, right? And it's like a sport with teams and competitions, and so I think it's to think of climbers as only dirt bags. I think you're missing the whole point these days. I'm not saying that's what you're thinking, but I've like a lot of people.
But there's a market to it,
there's totally a market.
Absolutely.
Are
you guys doing like guided trips, or do y'all do much?
That was always
experiences.
So that was always part of my goal, was to create our own guided trips and guided experiences. I quickly realized that would be really difficult because, specializing in what we do and where our money comes from is key, right? So we're a hotel. We got to be good at that. There's plenty of guides out there that we can partner with, and we've done that. Would I like to lean more into that so that we have like A-Lodge branded, experiences that are led by a third-party guide? That makes a lot of sense to me. We've kind of dabbled in some of that, and it didn't work that well. So I kind of pulled back from it. But I think eventually, that would make a lot of sense. But on the other hand, what we've kind of learned is that if you're going to go out and spend, a bunch of money on a proper climbing guide, you're going to research that and book that on your own. It's not really dependent on where you stay. So that's a whole other discussion, but I think there is something there. But I think you got to stay focused on what you actually do and what your specialization is. And for us, it's creating a lodging property that both appeals to climbers, like somebody who's climbing 513 and is a super badass, as well as appealing to somebody that, is a family from Kansas that just is like, oh, I'm in Boulder, Colorado. It's an adventure capital.
Yeah.
It's cool that this place has an adventure feel to it, but I still want to stay there because it still appeals to them.
What are the ways that you help those kind of people find, local adventures that may not be the 513?
Totally. So we've got in our rooms, we have a 70-page guidebook that my business partner and I wrote.
Oh, nice.
And it's, I'd love to show it to you, but it's like, everything from the restaurants that we recommend to, where we recommend to go trad climbing to, easy like bike rides along the creek. And it's just all, we kind of wrote it like Asa's favorite climbs, right? And, we picked like, Gunner, like our dog's favorite, bike rides. And we just like made up names, and we have friends and dogs as like the people who are the experts in each kind of sport or experience. And, so that's 70 pages long. And that's, one of the amenities that we kind of really focus on is kind of giving this like locals personal touch, so that everybody in the room has like a physical little guidebook that is A-Lodge, that was written by me and Chris. And, really has that like local expert advice.
Love it.
Then in addition, on our website, we've got, a ton of different information, similar information about all the different things you can do around Boulder. I mean, everybody's got that these days on their websites, but we made sure to be really specific on that. That also helps with SEO, of course,
Yeah.
as well as our blog posts that we continue to write. And then, of course, we also consider our front desk to be adventure concierge. So all of the people that work at our front desk, they are great front desk hotel people, but they also live in Colorado. They work at A Lodge for a reason rather than Marriott, right? They are either climbers or mountain bikers or fly fishermen or women. So we want them to be able to provide kind of concierge service adventure advice for guests who come up and they're like, hey, I want to go rafting or I want to go climbing. Like, what should I do? And then our front desk can really, speak to them because they know.
Yeah.
It's not like we have a concierge desk that a concierge sits at all day long, like you'd find at a 5-star resort in Hawaii or something like that. We're small. So we have to make them, both a front desk person, an adventure concierge, and a bartender, because that's where our bar is. It's at the front desk.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
they're all of that.
Yeah. So so we're going to have a similar kind of 22 room, and staffing, self-management, outside management, those have been a lot of our discussions of figuring out what should this really look like. How did you guys decide on your management structure and staffing, and what have y'all set it up to be?
I mean, again, we started this 10 years ago. We took over and we had the original staff from the former owner.
Okay.
And then it was me and Chris, and we had guests in the rooms. And we were like, okay, well, let's figure this out. So first I had to figure out how to run a wastewater treatment plant that's regulated by the state. So that was fun. But, we didn't have we had a business plan, but we kind of figured things out in actually operating it. I think that eventually we hired a GM. We hired a maintenance person because this property in particular is older and it was built by mountain cowboys without any regulations back in the day. So there's a lot of issues that do come up with the infrastructure. So rather than hiring somebody or contracting for somebody who's going to cost $250 just to show up to fix stuff whenever it happens, having somebody who's on salary to be here every day to really know the property, that would wind up saving us money and provide better service for our guests and fix things faster. So I think that was important for us.
Yeah.
For you, if you're doing a new build, you might not need that, right? Like hopefully, you're the architect, so it's going to work perfectly as soon as it's built. Yeah.
I did manage a camp for about 5 years during when I was getting my undergrad degree, and it reminds me of some of the stories I've heard you talk about here, because it was an old 1920s camp, and it was always shit was freezing, and it was down in Texas, and I guess they just kind of ran plumbing outside, but it does freeze in Texas, and once a year everything would freeze and bust, and I'd just curse for hours, be out there trying to weld and get things to come together. So I know the pains of having an old camp that you're having to pull together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, but with management, this was a bootstrap project, so we've had to keep our costs down. We were leasing it, so we didn't have a management deal. And hiring a GM, I only did that once I started the Lions property, our second property.
And they could kind of split between the two.
Yeah, because I wasn't able to just 100% focus on this, and we really needed 2 people on this project to be involved to make sure that everything was taken care of, because there's just so much that goes into it. And so that being said, I mean, in the last 3 years, our labor costs have gone up, and we've made a couple of hires that, have added to it, but our labor costs have gone up like 70%.
Have you found ways to make it more efficient, like remote check-in or anything like that?
Yeah. So we use Cloud Beds. That's our software that we use. They have a program called Whistle, and what that is, it's a communication system. And so here in Boulder, we use that to, communicate with the guests before they check in. We kind of ask the guests like, hey, do you want to rent an e-bike? Do you want to book a sauna session? Do you want an early check-in? Those are like little ways to get small upsells. Yeah. But then the big thing for us is that we send them an online registration form so that they can sign a registration card before they even arrive. So that way we're not printing out 1 billion of these registration cards, having them sign them, storing all this paper. It streamlines the check-in process. It also gets us to learn more about our guests before they even arrive at our property. In Lions, we only have 7 rooms, which I don't recommend for anybody to ever run a 7-room hotel. Okay. There's just not enough volume, right? Like you still have all the same headaches. You just have no revenue. So, but that project is super cool. It's a 7-room hotel. It's also a beer garden event space, and it's a thrift shop in the front.
Do you still have to staff it, or can you Airbnb remote check-in?
Yes. So that's how. Thank you. What we do in Lions is I used to have a front desk staff there, and I quickly realized like there's if I have somebody sitting around all day, we're never going to make any money. Like there's just not enough margin here to do that. So using Whistle, we operate that place essentially like an Airbnb hotel. Yeah. So we don't have a front desk there. We have smart locks on the doors. People check in online. Then once they're checked in, they get their check-in information sent to them. So their door code, directions to their door, Wi-Fi password, and then using Whistle, I can communicate with the guests, make sure that they have everything they need, that they're satisfied. And there's both custom texts and emails that are sent out, custom messages, as well as automated messages, so that we're actually sending out like a enjoyment survey in the middle of their stay to just check in, just be like, hey, on a, yes or no, would you stay here again? And if they say no, then we automatically send them a text right away and be like, hey, like, how can we make this better? Like, we want to make sure that you're taken care of. And then if they, when they're leaving, we also send them a survey and figure out how do we get that 5-star review? And if we're not going to get the 5-star review, how do we figure out what to do better next time? Or how do we get them to give us 5 stars? And then if they're going to give us 1 star, then how do we not send them a link to leave a review?
Yeah, kind of filter that out.
Yeah, you filter that out, right? So, but what that's done is that it used to be that you had to do all that in person or through training your front desk. Now you can automate a lot of that stuff. And then you're still having to monitor it and, write custom messages, but you're not having to make sure that you start that conversation. Yeah. It's automatically started. And you're steering it in the right direction through automation.
So where do you see what's next for A Lodge and you in 5 years? What's kind of projection here?
That's a good question. Thank you. I want to climb more. I want to hang out with my 2-year-old son more. Cool. That being said, what inspires me just as much is growth. Like I hate to sound corny, but the whole mantra of if you're not growing, you're dying is kind of true. Like we're humans. We need constant growth. And so if you are stagnant, then as a human, you feel like you're dying, right? Like it doesn't feel great. I mean, look, in a business, you could be stagnant and you could be growing, traveling a ton and climbing and, raising your kids, and that's growth on its own. What but what I really want is I want to continuously improve these two properties. We're doing the sauna over here. There's a lot of little things we're doing on this property, and there's always improvements to do here. We got the house next door that we're launching. That's going to be fantastic. And Lions, we're actually, we do a ton of rehearsal dinners and welcome parties for all the weddings in Lions. And we noticed that our food trucks that come through, 25% of the time they'd bail on us, or they wouldn't be good, or, it wasn't consistent. So we are going to do our own food trailer on site there, which I'm super nervous about because I don't know jack about food. But I've got the right guy in place to launch that. So that's happening this summer.
Nice.
And then what I really want to do is open new amazing A-lodges with the same vision of bringing, providing access, adventure, and amenities to customers for, at amazing properties throughout Colorado. So, I'd love to do, there's so many different markets around Colorado where I just want to go hang out. And that's where I'd want to do an A-lodge, is somewhere where I want to go. So that's the big vision. Getting there and making sure that I've learned from the mistakes that I've made over the past 10 years is super difficult. So I don't know if we'll ever do another one, but I think we will. And, that's the challenge. That's the next big wall for me.
There you go. You need to go get one.
Yeah.
Well done on all the stuff you've done here. And thank you so much for just taking the time to share your experience and wisdom. This has been super fun, Asa. So appreciate it.
Thank you. And thanks for driving all the way up, and good luck. Can't wait to stay at Red.
Yeah, we will definitely have you out, and hopefully we can do some collaborations on some things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.